Could Iraq be on the brink of civil war? Protesters in Baghdad expressing outrage after Wednesday's storming of an anti-government rally in the holy city of Najaf by supporters of populist cleric Moqtada al-Sadr. At least 7 killed in what could be a turning point in the 4-month uprising against a power-sharing system that demonstrators say has made politicians in that country unaccountable, with corruption and mismanagement unchecked. As for Moqtada al-Sadr, who, by the way, is currently in neighboring Iran, he has so far expressed support for the street, a street which had denounced in equal measure the outsized influence of Tehran and Washington when it comes to domestic affairs. And just because most of the protesters are Shia, not Sunni, it doesn't stop them from pressing for an independent path for their country. That U.S.-Iran rivalry playing out in full 1 month ago when a U.S. drone killed senior Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani in the suburbs of Baghdad. To find out how it has impacted Iraq's movement, France 24 went there. Senior correspondents Cyril Payen and Amar al-Hamidawi filed an exclusive report you're about to see. Cyril, who joins us for more in a moment in this special edition of the France 24 debate. We also want to welcome former French ambassador to Iran, François Nicoulot.
Good evening.
Thanks for being with us. Reporter at Nivat, your 2013 documentary, Iraq, The Shadow of War, where you too spoke with ordinary citizens in that country. Welcome back to the show. And from Erbil, freelance journalist Hiwa Osman, former advisor to late Iraqi President Jalal Talabani. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter. The hashtag is F24debate. Cyril Payen, we're going to call up a map. Tell us where you went for this.
Well, we've decided with Amar al-Midawi, where we have been extensively covering Iraq for the past 3-4 years since the defeat against Daesh. We decided to go in deep south from Nasiriyah, Kerbala, Najaf, of course, and Basra. Basra is the second city of Iraq and one of the poorest, sadly. And this is one of the epicenter of this uprising. This is popular uprising, as you were saying, anti-system, anti-government, anti-corruption, anti-religious parties, anti-pro-Iranian militias, insurrection and demonstration. So we decided to spend a few days there to understand how it all started 4 months ago, which with a very heavy toll, because if you just compare with the springtime, as we call in Lebanon or Algeria, there is no death, there is nobody dead in the streets of these countries. In Iraq, for a reason, it's out of the radar, we don't talk about it, but we have more than 600 people dead, 25,000 injuries, lots of disappearances, and it's going on and on through chaos, brink of civil war, as you were saying.
Yet, as we're going to see in that report, people still returning to the streets. Has it changed? It's been a little more than 1 month since the killing of Qasem Soleimani. Has that changed the movement?
Well, it's probably a turning point. Not regarding the demonstrators, the entire system, which are youngsters from 15 to 17 years old students who are just taking the streets and not going to university. By the way, blocking university, blocking government offices. But you have also part of people from the civil societies, lawyers, merchants, people who are just going for anywhere. They just want to be martyred, by the way, because they say we lost everything, especially in the south. We are poor, we are already dead. So what can death add to our life? So for these people, didn't change much. On the other side, on the pro-Iranian militias, the al-Shabi, which is composed of 120,000 people, paramilitary, which we know very well because we spent a few weeks with them 2 years ago. And for the religious party, it makes a real big change. It means they are threatened now about the streets of Iraq. So then they turn their guns on the very demonstrators. And this is just, sadly for Iraq, what we just happened to see what's going on in Najaf last week. And we saw with Amar, this started 10 days ago in the streets of Basra and Nasiriyah, when there is really now all the thing, again, the segments for a civil war in the country.
What's the calculus for Moqtada al-Sadr when his supporters shooting with live rounds at people who are peacefully rallying in the square in Najaf?
Again, it's a turning point. The move from this gentleman, Moqtada al-Sadr, is a turning point. He just was moving along with the protesters, the demonstrators, and now is putting his men with guns.
You're saying there's a risk of civil war?
There is very much, yeah. We don't see ahead something which is any government with this proxy geopolitical war between America and Iran having a lot of things to lose in Iraq. We don't really see how you can solve that by the weeks and looking at the determination of the demonstrators.
All right, thanks for joining us, Cyril Payen. We're going to put that, of course, to the rest of our panel. First, though, that exclusive report filmed for reporters. It's the France 24 investigative news magazine.
A show of force in Baghdad. Thousands of people, pro-Iranian militiamen, religious leaders, filling the streets to reject American interference.
There is an American plot to poison Iraq. But we, the Iraqi patriots, are going to fight this Western conspiracy. And we are determined.
Those who claim that Americans are welcome in Iraq are traitors. They are servants of Westerners. The Americans have been paying them, these dumb, young people, to demonstrate for weeks. They are the servants of America and the armed wing of colonization.
This rally marks a turning point in Iraq's recent unrest. It is the first time thousands have taken to the streets to undermine the country's pro-democracy movement. The movement began life in October 2019, much of it in the Shia heartlands of southern Iraq. So we headed south to Nasiriyah, the country's fourth city. 120 demonstrators have been killed here so far, thousands more injured. This bridge over the Euphrates River has been held for weeks by a group of masked teenagers. Most of them have been involved since day one, blocking roads, grinding the city to a halt. Mohammed is barely 18 years old, but he's the oldest in this gang, and he's their leader.
We are determined. We'll go to our deaths if we have to. Everyone knows it here. Even if we are killed by the hundreds, our decision is made. We are ready to sacrifice ourselves to change Iraq. I've been here a long time. I know the people shooting us are the militias, not the security forces.
Next to the bridge, portraits of protesters, now martyrs to the cause.
Here is the dam. We block everything we can, public buildings, schools, bridges. You see these motorcycles? They are the tools of our revolt.
We just organized the blockade. We're not thugs. We're not armed. We don't kill.
Come on, guys.
These young insurgents head to the Faculty of Medicine. Confusion persists there, but their blockade seems to be holding.
You see, we do nothing more. We control and we neutralize the situation.
What's he doing? Stop filming.
It's good, we won. No class today. School's out.
Mohammed and his fellow rebels are taking an enormous risk. They've long been in the crosshairs of pro-Iranian militias, the invisible hand that's been targeting these demonstrators for months.
That's the mayor's house. The demonstrators burned it. That's just how it is. I hope that the next mayor, the one who emerges after this uprising, will be aware of his responsibilities and of what might happen if he's not a good leader. We don't want politicians who are corrupt or rotten anymore. We want Iraq for the Iraqis.
We'll decide tonight after dark, okay? Good luck, and thank you.
Hussein is a prominent lawyer here in Nasiriyah, but he abandoned everything to get involved in the protest movement.
This is our Tahrir Square, like in Baghdad. We have the epicenter of our protest here. There's a microcosm of Iraqi society swept up by hope, by the possibility of change. And there is something different here. As you can see, there are no militia or party flags here, only the Iraqi flag. We are fighting for one flag only, for Iraq.
Next stop, Karbala. It's Friday and weekly prayers are being held in one of the most sacred sites in Shia Islam, the shrine of Imam Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. It feels like yet another perilous moment for Iraq, and the whole country is glued to the sermons of Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, Iraq's most respected religious figure.
والتكبر على الآخرين والذي يؤدي إلى العجب والتجبر فيطغى.
Just after the sermon, one of Sistani's key advisors shares his thoughts with us.
At the start of the demonstrations, I think the protesters were driven by legitimate demands. Everything was clear then. But today it seems we have passed that stage. There are people using these demonstrations for their own ends. Who benefits from this chaos? There are evil forces, countries far away who have ideas and have been trying to influence protesters.
Throughout southern Iraq, tensions are rising. Protesters have just issued an ultimatum to the government. And Basra, a city which borders Iran, is feeling the heat.
Don't be afraid. Do not worry. Calm down, children. Everything will be fine.
I have been arrested twice. I know prison. I'm not afraid of the police. The militias, on the other hand, are merciless. Today, the real threat comes from Iran. Iran wants to conquer Iraq, and Iran is using religious militias to kill us. They want us to leave Iraq, but I will never leave.
Jabbar is an icon of the uprising here in Basra, a city where hundreds have died since October. He is a former member of the powerful pro-Iranian militia, the Hashad al-Shabi. It wasn't long ago that these militiamen were victorious over the Islamic State group and welcomed here as liberators, but today they are as feared as they are hated. It isn't easy to speak to anyone linked to the militias, but an official from the League of the Righteous, one of the most radical groups within the Hashad al-Shabi, does agree to meet.
People are being manipulated. This is nothing more than a game, and demonstrators are the victims. The problem is Western interference, specifically American interference. In Iraq, there is an invisible foreign hand which influences demonstrators. Americans and their allies are playing mind games. And why do they accuse us of evil? It's to divide us, to pit us against each other, to divide Iraq.
Night falls in Basra, and tonight, as he does once a week, Jabbar is attempting to cross the city to see his family. It's something he does at great personal risk.
I'm being chased. There is a price on my head, I know it. So I change hideouts every day. When my wife cries and asks me, what will become of us? I don't have an answer. In fact, I have only one thought, that God is there and He will protect us. Okay, that's where you stop. Good, right here. I went to Syria with my brother and my friends. I don't understand. I did all this for them. And today they're shooting at me? We're all Iraqis. And I'm a son of the militias.
We are scared here. We are terrified when someone knocks on the door. Every time my mother-in-law hears a noise, she says, "That's it, they've come to get it." We live in fear, at night, but in the day too. When we say Jabbar, we are happy, but we say to ourselves, the militias will be lingering.
I know it. There is no return. Either we win or I die a martyr. Imam Hussein said we had to live with dignity, but we're miserable.
By now, the protesters' ultimatum to the government has expired, and in Nasiriyah, the demonstrators have stepped up a gear. One of Iraq's main highways runs through the city, and today it is completely blocked. Like all the leaders of the protest movement, Hussein, the lawyer, has come to see what everybody here simply calls the front line.
All the goods used by the central government and religious parties come through here. Maximum pressure, that's the strategy. We cut off their access. It is the resources of our city that keep them alive. It's over now. And if they refuse to listen, we know what the next step is. It's simple. We're going to shut down the oil wells in southern Iraq. We rebelled here in Nasiriyah. So let me be clear, if it is necessary, we will move the capital of Iraq from Baghdad to Nasiriyah. It will be a temporary capital until a government is formed.
It's the end of another intense day in Basra. Here we find the same slogans and the same determination. Night has fallen and Basra is at its most dangerous once again.
Look, we've cut the avenue. We will not give it up. It's our front line. We're holding this place, while others go on the offensive. This, I always keep it with me, just in case. If they want to catch me, I'll throw it in their faces. And then, like that, I will die a martyr.
300 yards away, we join the hardcore of Jabbar's group. It is an ad hoc brigade fighting a real guerrilla battle.
The security forces have come this far. Now they are being pushed back. We are making progress and pushing forward. Look what these bastards are doing. Instead of defending the Iraqis, they are shooting at us.
Hold on, stay together.
It's midnight in the heart of the city. Tensions are at their highest. Suddenly, everything changes. No one will ever know who shot at protesters that night, security forces or armed militia. Over 650 people have died in the Iraq uprising since October, and more than 25,000 injured.
Yeah, that if you missed parts of that, it's on our website, France24.com. It's for reporters, the France 24 investigative news magazine. We're talking about it in the company of former French ambassador to Iran, François Nicolot, reporter Anne Nivant, your 2013 documentary, Iraq, The Shadow of War. And from Erbil, freelance reporter Hiwa Osman, former advisor to late Iraqi President Jalal Talabani. Hiwa, where you're sitting right now, it couldn't be at a further away from Basra, where we saw some of those images in that report at the other end of Iraq. Your reaction to what's unfolding 4 months on?
Well, we've been following the events very closely. Initially, in the early days of the protests, I was in Baghdad myself, covering the protests on my Twitter and Facebook page. Until journalists started to receive death threats. Then many of us had to evacuate the city and rely on protesters' videos and phone calls and reports that they were sending them to us, especially with Iraqi journalists. Their faces were well known to the authorities and the militias, and they were being targeted. Quite a few of our colleagues were targeted over the past 4 months because of the reporting of the protests.
And we saw in that report, he was one of the hardliners telling our team how there's the unseen hand of the West. Your reaction?
No, that's absolute rubbish. If you look at the hands of Iran, compared to the hands of the West, the hands of Iran killed over 600 protesters so far. The hands of the West killed 2 people, Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. So that is, it tells you something about the unseen hands of the West. People like us who are reporters, who are known for being objective, not part of any political movement, not part of any agenda, do not have any agenda. They see objective and impartial reporters as Western tools, and they have all kinds of labels for reporters and for other people who do not accept the current governance structures and systems in Iraq. These uprisings that started on October 1st is purely about good governance.
There was that one moment in the report, Hiwa, where we heard a spokesperson for Iraq's top Shia cleric, Ayatollah Ali Sistani, talking about how at this point, the protest movement, there are foreign nations benefiting. How did you interpret his remarks?
The person that you interviewed is he's in Karbala. He's one of the commanders of one of the militias. He poses to international reporters as a spokesperson of Sistani. Sistani has 2 spokespeople, Abdul Mahdi al-Karbala'i, and another guy in Beirut whose name is Khafaf, Mr. Khafaf. Apart from those two, many other people try and talk in the name of Sistani. Sistani has a website, and he has a Friday sermon, a Friday statement. None of any word of Sistani accuses foreign or international operators. He talks about Iraqi sovereignty. He talks about the need for Iraq to be independent, and he puts the burden for this on the government of Iraq to be independent of all external interference. This means Iran and America. So he does not, there is Sistani as a cleric, he's one of the wisest men that Iraq has seen since 2003. Had it not been for him, a much more severe civil war would have taken place in this country. And even these days, one of the main protectors of the protesters is Mr. Sistani and his Friday sermons. This is why the hardliners, the hardline groups, they try to drag him into their direction, but they are failing so far. And that's why the protesters are relying heavily on his sermons, and they abide by his directions and by his guidance.
And Nivat, your reaction to what we saw in that report and what it tells you about the state of play right now as we speak?
Well, I'm very struck by this report, and I must thank France 24 to have shown it to the viewers, because it must be seen. I've been reporting from inside Iraq for more than 10 years in a row, since the start of the war. Remember, 2003, America went into Iraq and was supposed to find the weapons of mass destruction that they never found. And since that date, it has been chaotic in Iraq. But the main difference between what I saw then and what is happening now is the dynamics through these youth. Young people. These young people, I've never seen that during my 10 years in Iraq, because those guys, they were babies. And
back in 2003.
Exactly. At that time, they were babies. And I think what's happening is that because of Iraq's invasion by the United States, it provoked a change, completely change in the wall of Iraq, in the way Iraq is functioning. And what is happening now in Iraq is the total absence of a state. The state is very weak, and the young people say it, and they are not afraid to say it and to declare it and to stay in the street and to declare it again and again and again. And Moqtada al-Sadr, who is this relatively young leader who was already present when I was there 10 years ago and who wants to be even more important in the future, is now is torn. He's completely torn between participating to this protest or not participating to this protest.
Yeah, he's on the other side, totally.
He is sometimes pretending that he's on their side, and he's then telling that he's not on their side. And I think that is a strategy on his part. But to us Westerners, the good news, I would like to say, is that Iraq is alive. Iraq is declaring that it's alive, but it's dangerous, it's very violent. We saw that since October. As Cyril said, there have been people killed, and that is the big difference between what happened in Iraq and what happened in the rest of the Middle East. But Iraq is alive.
But at the same time, for those of us old enough to remember, is this not the cocktail of what we saw in Lebanon, where you have these rival forces and these outside players? Could it all lead to a long civil war?
Well, to my point of view, Iraq has always been, since 2003, in a sort of a civil war of its own. So to me, it's nothing new. It's not that it was better before. Between 2003 up to now, the situation in Iraq has been chaotic. And the big difference now is that we are experiencing the consequences of what the United States did or did not do in invading Iraq. Nothing has been solved in Iraq. And here we are now. And Iraq has, but what I see through these young people is that even though they are divided, even though it's violent, even though they are against the government that is, there is still no government In fact, the government has to be created, formed in the next months. But even though they are against this government, they want their country to be ruled. They want their country to exist and to be strong. And it's maybe not the case, but something will happen. There is no vacuum in Iraq. There are different players. We're going to probably now mention Iran, which is an outside player. But to my point of view, what's happening inside Iraq is not to be left apart. Iraqis are alive. They are weak. They are divided. They are torn. They are poor. Moqtada al-Sadr is playing on all that, but the elite, the political elite, is it cannot continue to be ruling the country.
All right,
cannot.
The funeral held this Thursday in Najaf for those 7 victims of that assault on the protesters that were gathered in Najaf, supporters of Moqtada al-Sadr opening fire, with everybody wondering now why at this particular moment.
A group of al-Sadr supporters stormed our tents. We told them, "You attacked us at overpasses and even used live ammunition. Why are you here?" They then started beating us with sticks and with batons.
Ambassador Nicolo, what to make of this populist cleric who comes from a family that's well known, who right now, by the way, is in Iran? What do you make of Moqtada al-Sadr?
It's a populist leader, you know, and he's hesitating between. He does not want to. He wants to be always in front of events, you know. He's afraid to be left behind. That's what's interesting, and so he's trying to catch. I mean, the last opportunity, the best opportunity to always remain in front, you know. Even, but it's not, of course, very, very organized, very structured, and he's. Intellectually, religiously, it does not play at a very high level, obviously. But of course, he benefits from the prestige of his family, with many martyrs during the Saddam era. And but himself is really, you know, a kind of a leaf in the wind, you know, if I may say. But there is something more important, in fact, in all of this. In fact, and what moves me in what we've seen is the birth or the birth of a feeling of national unity. You know, so many people along the years have seen Iraq is an artificial country. It was a creation of the Sykes-Picot Agreement of the great powers after the First World War. But in fact, Iraq should be divided. It should be divided between the Kurds, the Shias in the south, and the Arab, the Sunni. But it's not a real country. And now we see this youth, which really, I mean, what they want, what they care for is precisely Iraq, you know. And
even though right now what we're witnessing is an argument between the forces that are in the Shia South.
Yes, but first, of course, I mean, there is a majority of Shias in the demonstration because Shias are a majority in the country, and it takes place in fact, it's true, in the poorest areas and the south in particular. But it's quite interesting. For instance, if you take the case of the south of Basra, people are poor. The region is rich. The oil is there. You know, all of the wealth of Iraq comes from this region, and the people could say, well, the solution would be to cut ourselves off the other parts of Iraq. I mean, because they're benefiting from our wealth, and we should keep our wealth for ourselves. This not at all. There is nothing of this kind in all we have seen. There is this. this longing for pride, for the pride of the nation, and of course, which it's true, the suffering from the heavy hand of the Iranians, of the Americans. They've been grateful to Iran, and when Daesh was coming close to Baghdad, the Iranians were the first to come to the help of the Iraqis. The Americans, the Europeans, came a few weeks later, but at the acme of the danger, the people who were there, it was the Iranians, and they were grateful. But unfortunately, things have turned sour. Corruption, all of this, factionalism entered in all these games, and people have been disappointed by that, and they don't want they don't want the influence, they reject the influence of Iran, they reject the influence of the United States. They're ready for a proud, united, strong Iraq. And clean, if I may say.
I want to pick up on what Najaf said about there being sort of this perpetual state of crisis and civil war at times in Iraq since 2003. Hiwa Osman, obviously, the attention has been in the last couple of years on ISIS, the battle to retake Mosul. Then you had where you are in Iraqi Kurdistan. There was that independence referendum. Where you're sitting in Erbil, tell us the truth. Do people feel solidarity with those that are in Basra?
Absolutely. It's not it's not a personal story that I can tell you, but. For example, the Kurdistan region's hospitals have opened up because a lot of the injured of the protesters, over 25,000 people are injured. The hospitals of the Kurdish region have opened up for the injured of the protesters from the center and the south. Many of the protesters were afraid to go to hospitals in the center and the south because they would be arrested or killed in the hospitals by the pro-Iranian militias who've been chasing them in every place. So they come to the safety of the Kurdistan region for treatment. This is one. Charities from the Kurdish region went to the south and helped the families of those who were killed. So yes, there is a strong sense of solidarity, because the uprising now in the Shia parts of Iraq is against the exact political elite that has led things to where we are now. Basra, as the Mr. Ambassador said, is one of the richest countries in the richest regions in the world, and it still does not have drinking water or electricity. Other parts of the country, they are derelict. Poverty is rife everywhere you go. I'm sure the reporter saw all of these bad services, bad education, bad health. Everything is way below desirable. So there is a strong sense of solidarity. The existing mentality that rules the country is not that of a government or good governance. The Iraqi government failed to prove that it acts like a government, because on October 2nd almost, the militias, the pro-Iranian militias, have hijacked the political and security decision. Many of the people who were killed in the protests were killed in full view of the security forces, official security forces, and the army and the anti-riot police by the pro-Iranian militias. And neither the government nor the forces nor the army were able to do nor the judiciary were able to do anything about them. Now with the new prime minister designate, many of us tell him, your biggest challenge to prove to people, your first and only challenge now, to prove to people that you can be a good prime minister or a different prime minister or a different government from one before, is to bring to justice the killers of the 600 protesters that the militias have killed.
Let's listen to him. He's been speaking this Thursday, Mohammed Alawi, Prime Minister designate. We can show you images a few days back when he was with his predecessor who's been forced out by these protests, Adil Abdul Mahdi. He's still trying to form a government. This is what he had to say in that televised speech, where he appeared to send an olive branch to those protesters, saying, quote, the situation is not acceptable at all.
The priority of the upcoming government and its first article is to undertake serious investigations in regards to the violations that were practiced against the protesters and security forces. Everyone who is standing behind these violations will be held accountable, no matter who it is and to which side he belongs to, as the Iraqi blood is our only red line.
And Nivan?
The Prime Minister can say what he wants, but he will still remain a weak politician. This Alawi is not known to be a very strong politician, and that is one of the main problems to constitute a government in Iraq now. And I would even say that's not maybe, unfortunately, the key of the question, or the key of the situation. The key is what's happening in the street. The key is the violence coming from the street. And I agree with what my colleague said from Kurdistan, from Erbil. There is solidarity. But Kurdistan has always been a safe haven since the beginning of the war. Kurdistan, I mean, if not Kurdistan, I don't know how a lot of Iraqis would have survived, because everybody was going to inside Kurdistan in order to escape the war when I was there, including doctors, teachers, etc., etc. But remains the question of the state building in Iraq. There are some questions about which Kurds disagree with the rest of Iraq. And those questions must be solved. And they are far from being solved now. They are far, far from being solved. The question of how to keep living together and constitute a country.
Because when push comes to shove, is it still, oh, he's a Shia, she's a Sunni Arab, he's a Kurd?
Well, of course, now everybody knows who is who. Before the war, before 2003, it was less the case, and there were more.
Well, there were mass graves
mixed,
before the war,
and there were absolutely, but there were also less, more. I would say more serenity. I'm sorry, I can't speak if you speak in my ear. There was less serenity in between people. So after a war like such a war we all witnessed since 2003. Nothing is pacified in Iraq. So I don't know what will happen, but I just know that some countries, neighboring countries, are trying to get the benefit from the weakness of Iraq, for sure. And I also know that some politicians are trying also to take over from this situation. And one of them is Moqtada al-Sadr. Moqtada al-Sadr has always been waiting for the right moment, and he withdrew his support to the protesters. He was supporting them a few days ago, last Friday, during the March of the Millions, and now he's not supporting them. Why? Because his core supporters are not urban, are not educated, and they are less influenceable. Moqtada al-Sadr wants to influence the people. He wants to have an impact. He wants to lead them. And the rest of the students, etc., the one we saw, even in Basra, they are less anti-American than Moqtada al-Sadr is.
So he's in Iran right now. What is the calculus of Tehran when it comes to Iraq at this point?
What's happened? I believe that there must be some kind of soul searching in Tehran at the moment. And it's interesting because even before all we have seen, there were critics within the establishment, within the Ministry of Intelligence, critics about precisely the policy of General Soleimani, which was considered a bit too heavy-handed, and people were afraid that there would be one day a kind of backlash, and this is what we are seeing at the present moment. And if a few weeks ago in Iran, people were still jubilant about the influence of Iran in the region, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Syria, and so on. And suddenly, the winds are turning,
And what about with Donald Trump's decision to kill that senior Quds commander, Qasem Soleimani? His State of the Union address, he talked about Soleimani as being, quote, the world's top terrorist this week, Donald Trump. what's the United States' position? How is that helping or hurting the cause of these people in Iraq?
Indeed, it didn't help, in fact, because it drove the attention back to another subject. It is difficult, precisely for the young people, or these young demonstrators, to keep the momentum, because it was broken by the crisis created by the death of Soleimani and the death of al-Mohandis, of course, who was the Iraqi. Head of all the militia, pro-Iranian militia. Now, this is the question of Soleimani. Was he a terrorist? Was he not? Everybody has been a terrorist one day or another. If
it's
you look
moving.
at history,
it's moving.
Who
is a terrorist? Who is not?
You can find plenty of terrorists, starting from who has become very respected heads of states, head of government, political figures. What is sure that Soleimani consider himself as a, of course, as a legitimate representative, official representative of Iran. When he was killed, he was not taking any precaution. He was not.
And he was making regular trips to Baghdad. One final question for you, Najaf, because since 2003, there's been this tug of war over Iraq between the United States and Tehran. We're almost out of time, but let me ask you, is that something that's going to continue now for years and years to come?
Well, there is no sign that it would stop. Why would it stop? Every country which is in a struggle like this one, it's a life struggle for Iraq, it's going to go on, of course, but someone, somehow, someone will win. But we don't know when. But what has been happening in Iraq now, I've never seen in my life as a war reporter. It's at the same time very annoying and something that we should salute, because, as I said, it is the proof that nothing is stopped in Iraq. But the people who will solve the problem are maybe not the one we think. And they are probably not the ones who are in charge right now.
All right, something we'll continue to follow. And Najaf, I want to thank you. I want to thank François Nicolo. I want to thank as well Hiwa Osman for being with us from Erbil. That report, that exclusive report, is on our website, France24.com. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.